On Saturday, August 19th, the Spokane County Democrats welcomed to the stage of Ferris High School Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes. Secretary Fontes, a former U.S. Marine, prosecuting attorney, and defense attorney, appealed to voters across the partisan spectrum when he defeated a MAGA movement election denier in the race for Arizona Secretary of State in 2022. In this conversation with supporters of democracy in the Inland Northwest, Secretary Fontes urged us to speak clearly and plainly about the threat the fascist, anti-American MAGA movement poses to Americans and to our freedom to govern ourselves. Have a listen and see if you're not inspired to play a part in furthering the great American experiment in a government of, by, and for the people.
I really appreciate the welcome. It is a special thing knowing what your community is going through right now to have you here, especially when we all are thinking about our friends, our families. In fact, I was at dinner with a young man who is a level 3 evacuee. Luckily, his home and all of the buildings are in good shape. We hope the livestock is still in good shape, I think, but we've got all of those folks out there who are doing all that work, our first responders, police, fire officers, everybody. We hold them all in our hearts and prayers tonight. I want to thank you, Vicki, for that very generous introduction. I don't know that I deserve it, but I'll take it. I want to thank the Spokane County Chair, Carmela, who's over here in the front row, for welcoming me. And I think there's a vice chair of the Washington State Democratic Party, David Green, in the audience. There he is, right here. Thank you for coming out, sir. I want to make sure that we all acknowledge as well. I understand there's a banner out front that says "Democrats defend democracy." Well, if there's any non-Democrats in the crowd, I'd argue that you defend democracy as well, and we ought to welcome every person of every political party or no political party into the world of defense democracy. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about a lot of stuff. One of the things I want to make very, very clear is I am not speaking today in my official capacity as Arizona's Chief Election Officer because I'm going to talk to a lot of Democrats tonight, and we're not going to pull any punches. I am here as an Arizona Democrat. I'm here as a man who believes in people over corporate interests. I'm here as a person who really, really, really wants there to be a bright future for our children, all of our children, and I want to make sure that we're very clear about that. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you about all of this is as follows. We cannot govern if we do not win. Don't forget that. We cannot govern if we do not win. It is not any more complicated than walking and chewing gum to be able to understand that in the United States of America we have two very distinct and separate political processes. One of them is getting into office, and the other one is running the office. And you cannot get into the office and run it unless you actually win a political campaign. So let's stop pulling punches and pretending like we care about the feelings of those who would try to overthrow our government. Let's stop pulling punches and pretending like one tiny little interest group's feelings is going to keep us from communicating among the broader population. Let's stop feeling our way through these things, and let's start fighting our way into victories for Democrats. The Constitution of the United States of America is in jeopardy. We know this to be true. I don't have to go through an entire academic diatribe, although, Professor, with respect to the ivory tower here, I have to. Thank you very much. We broke bread a little bit earlier, so he gets where I'm coming from. We don't have to go through all of that to understand that we've got issues. Then I want to talk a little bit about the Constitution. The Constitution basically boils down into two words. Two simple words. that hold the whole general idea together, and that is due process. It is the process by which we govern. It is the document that establishes why we govern in the first place. You know, the preamble, general welfare, common defense, all that good stuff, right? So we've got the why and we've got the how in there, and it is about process. It's about how we convene, how and where levying of taxes is appropriate, who that falls to, what the judiciary is supposed to look like. And one of the things that we've done consistently in our history is amend those processes over time, appropriately so. And it takes a little bit to do that. But the document itself is about process. Even has an article in it that talks about the process of changing the Constitution itself. January 6, 2021 was about halting due process and moving towards an autocracy, a non-constitutional, undemocratic halt of the peaceful transition of power. It is about what one man wanted and what many other people were willing to do to assist that one man, as against the process. Vicki talked about the process a little bit. How one point in time is when all of the states come together when it comes to election administration, and that is for the certification of the Electoral College votes. That is a process. And we know due process applies to a lot of things. Criminal defense, it applies to all sorts of other stuff. But here's the deal. The notion that one person can stop all of that happening has an impact for every American voter, whatever side of the election you voted on. Because the notion is your vote doesn't matter. The process of registering, the process of voting, the process that election administrators go through, none of that really matters if that one guy gets his way. The constitutional order in their mind is therefore suspended. And that's why so many conservative members of our communities have wondered long and hard and are now starting to really voice that concern and come around. Because there's a lot of Republicans out there, a lot of independents out there, there's a lot of folks out there that question whether or not the rules were followed. One of them is running for president right now by the name of Mike Pence. He knew that what Donald Trump wanted to do on January 6th wasn't constitutional. Now, I'm not trying to lionize Mike Pence for just doing his job. Give me a break, okay? He's no hero in my mind. But he understood the notion. And as a conservative American, felt like it was his duty to move forward. Good for him, good for all of us. But imagine if he had not. How important is that one person's voice? It is as important as every one of your votes. Our Attorney General in Arizona, after a recount in one of our counties, only won, think about this, only won by 280 votes. We had 2.5 million votes cast in the state of Arizona. So if you think that one voice that you have doesn't matter, you're sorely mistaken. It is the process of bringing us all together. I have likened American elections, and you'll forgive me, Chevy trucks, to the heartbeat of America. We come together, we vote. She's busy, real busy for a little bit, and then we go on about our business. And then we come back together again. And it is a seasonal thing, it happens. And it just happens over and over again. And that heartbeat may give us new policies, new leaders. It might bring back old policies and old leaders. That's not a bad thing, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, right? This is what they wanted to stop. This is why it was an insurrection. And so anti-American, not un-American, but anti-American. Never forget how close we came. And what was it founded on? What was the notion of Trump being defrauded from office founded on? Where is the evidence to this day? My opponent, Mark Fincham, in the 2022 election for Secretary of State, said in one of our debates I had a binder of evidence that I was taking. Sort of like, what's his name's binder full of women? But this was a binder full of evidence he was taking to the Capitol on January 6th to give to his members of Congress. And this evidence was going to show proof that in Maricopa County, 2020, the election that I ran, There was fraud. This isn't a debate in 2022, folks. Nobody's ever seen this binder or any of the evidence in it. How real are the allegations? No evidence whatsoever, because they don't want due process. They just want Donald Trump to rule as an autocrat. And that is fascism. And when they get upset because I call them fascists, look, I really say this clearly. If you don't want me to call you a fascist, stop acting like a fascist. Now, one of the things that I'm going to help you understand a little bit about why I come to this space, why I think about things this way. There was a time when I was a young man. I was kids still. I was 13 or 14. I can't remember. Maybe 12. And I lived on a little ranch. It was 8 acres in southern Arizona, about 20 minutes north of the Mexican border. We had 1 or 2 head of cattle a year. We would take to slaughter. We had a duck pond and a bunch of chickens. We had a lot of chickens. And there was a box culvert that ran from the west side of our property under the interstate highway off the frontage road all the way through to some open range land. And my dad, who's a civil engineer, and his brother, also a civil engineer, were way out several miles into that, doing some surveying on some private property. And they noticed a herd of horses, small herd. Well, back in those days, this is in the early mid-'80s, Mexican drug runners would steal horses from ranchers in Mexico. They'd pack them up full of drugs, bring them north of the border, unload it onto trucks, and they would just abandon the horses. They're Mexican horses, they're outside of their country, nobody can figure out who did what, so they become property of the state. Well, my dad came back, told one of the local ranchers up Winfield, got a bunch of his boys out there, they brought them over and they quarantined them at our ranch. This is in Santa Cruz County, Arizona. And during that quarantine, they sent out the local veterinarian, Simon Escalada, and he gave them their vaccinations, and we fed them. I fed them, because I was the 12-year-old kid on the ranch, so I had to feed all the horses. And then about 30 days later, the sheriff held his auction. And it was a classic, old kind of auction. Y'all probably see those out here in these parts here and there. A whole bunch of folks showed up on the day of. It had been posted publicly. Trucks with trailers, trucks without trailers, lots of trucks with ice chests full of beer. You know, it was an auction. And they all came and parked on different parts of our property, and all were standing around that auction. The corral that we had the horses in and out of. And there was one little pickup truck, though, that was out of whack. It was a small Datsun, and it had a rickety old horse trailer on the back, and it had Sonoran plates on it. The guy that drove that truck had some paperwork in his hand and a branding iron. And he had brought all these documents to prove that one of the horses that was there at the auction was his. And he chatted with a couple of people. And I guess the word got around because they started auctioning these horses. And they were starting them at, $200, $300, whatever. Some of them were not too bad. We'd gotten them in good shape once they'd been fed and watered for a month. And this horse came up. And the auctioneer, at the direction of the sheriff's deputy, says, $200. And nobody made a bid. And he said $150, and nobody made a bid. And it went down to $100, and nobody made a bid. $50, $25. Nobody made a bid. And the auctioneer, at this time, I learned later, had the option of closing that auction and moving on to the next animal. And he looked over to the sheriff's deputy, and what did the sheriff's deputy do? He just nodded. The auctioneer knew what to do. And he said, $1. $1, give me $1. And that old man with his paperwork and his branding iron in one hand raised his other hand. The auctioneer said, $1, give me 2. Give me 2, give me 2, give me 2. You guys know how that sounds. Nobody made another bid. The man got his horse. He got it back for $1, which was probably $1 too much. The way that all of those people acted that day, without a word, without talking about it, without thinking about it, they just acted on their honor. Every single one of them did. That's the kind of lesson that I learned growing up in southern Arizona. And that's the kind of honor that Donald Trump and his fascist sycophants does not have. And we will not relent until we rid the United States of America of that new fascism. Now, I didn't come into politics because I felt like being a politician. Trust me, I could be making a hell of a lot more money still practicing law. And the fact that I've got a freshman starting in college in about a week and a half here is putting a plank on that. And I've seen some tough times. She's one of 3 girls. Imagine it, parents out there, you know what I'm talking about. I came into politics because in 2016, I took a trip with my mom to Greece, Athens, Greece. We stayed right outside, right off the Acropolis with the Parthenon right there and the museum and all this stuff, birthplace of democracy. Now, my mom is a retired teacher and school administrator at the time, public school teacher. I come from a family of those folks. And although when I was a kid, I was not applauding them. Let me just put it that way. I wanted to go to Athens, the birthplace of democracy, because I'm a little bit of a Hellenophile, right? As I was a kid, I was digging on the mythologies, right? And all the soap opera that is Greek mythology and all the storytelling. And then over time, I learned through my undergraduate studies in law school how important, you know, the Athenian story is to the establishment of the American Republic. And so my mom finally gave me that graduation gift of going to Greece. It was a little late, I was 46, but we went anyway. And it was in March of 2016. Now in Arizona, we have what's called a presidential preference election. That's our primary, and we have it in March, which is ridiculous, but we do. And in 2016, you might recall, the system failed, and many voters were subjected to 4 and 5 and some 6-hour-long lines to vote. Some estimates say that up to 130,000 Maricopa County residents and citizens couldn't vote because of those long lines. Well, I got a little angry. I got a lot angry. You know, being from a Mexican family, you get angry sometimes. And I decided to run for office. So I ran for Maricopa County Recorder, which is akin to your county auditors here in Washington. And I won. And that campaign, nobody thought I would win. The incumbent had been in office since 1988, 28 years. No Democrat had ever run against her, ever. I was 46 years old. She won when I was 18. Why am I telling you that? Because no Democrat ever got a chance to vote for a Democrat for 28 years when it came to that office. Because nobody bothered to run. And it's not like there weren't people who were eligible. Hell, Maricopa County is one of the fastest growing regions of the United States of America. There was just nobody who was willing to step up. Nobody was willing to challenge her. She'd been investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation back in the aughts, 2005, 2006, 2007, because Phoenix and the Maricopa County area was the highest space where there were identity thefts. And all the information was just pouring out of her office. But no Democrat ever ran against her. Why? Well, it's red. You can't beat her. Shame on us. Shame on us for not doing that, because once I ran, guess what ended up happening? We added almost 500,000 voters onto the voter rolls in the 4 years that I was the Maricopa County Recorder. We made it easier for folks to be engaged in their own democracy with a growing early vote list like you all have ballot by mail. It's so healthy here in Washington. We put a ballot tracking system into place that sent you a text message when the office was preparing a ballot for you. Sent you a text message when the ballot was mailed to you so you'd know to check the mailbox. We sent you a text message when your ballot got back to our office, and sent you another one when the signature was verified, and then sent you a last one when it went to tabulation. That's engaging voters. We made sure that voters in Maricopa County, and then eventually in my career moved over to Pima County. We did the same thing there. We created vote centers so that you didn't only have to go vote in your precinct. You could vote anywhere in your county, and you would get the right ballot, no provisional balloting. We dropped our provisional ballots significantly. And why is that important? Y'all heard of a congressman in Arizona named Andy Biggs, right? Andy Biggs won his Republican primary in that district, which is all encased in Maricopa County, in 2016 by 16 votes. By 16 votes, he won that Republican primary against Christine Jones. There were 220, 230 provisional ballots in that election that did not count because voters voted in the wrong precinct. Would Andy Biggs be in Congress right now had we had the system that I put in place eventually? I don't know, maybe not. But here's the bottom line. Run for office, even if you think you're going to lose. I thought I was going to lose, and I won. And look at what happened in Maricopa County. Joe Biden won Maricopa County by 40,000 votes. You think registering 500,000 new voters helps? You have to have faith, folks. And I'm not talking about faith in the good Lord and holy water faith. I'm talking about civic faith. I'm talking about the faith that we need to have in one another as citizens. That's the kind of faith that allowed me the courage to say, you know what? I just need to be a candidate so that I can get in there and have the conversation with this person who so many people complain about, but nobody's ever bothered to run against. We've got to have those conversations, and we've got to have faith. We've got to have faith in our team, we've got to have faith in our family, and we've got to have enough guts to get in there and chance the fact that we might win and be able to make a good difference. Because it was a chance. And we almost didn't get there. I mean, we won, which is great. But that's a local office. Local offices matter. Any of you ever took Vicki for granted in the past? You don't now, do you? No. Hell no, you don't. She's amazing. Local offices matter. But it's not just the office that runs elections. How many of you are sick and damn tired about this, the new Nazis trying to take all of our books away from our kids in our schools at the school districts? Book banning and book burning are real close cousins, folks. They're kissing cousins. All right? They ban books today, they're going to be burning them like later today. Why aren't you running for a school board office in your district that you live in? Why aren't you doing it? Think about that for a minute. Local offices matter. Why aren't you running for city council? Why aren't you doing all of those other things? Why? Because you might lose? So what? I lost in 2020. I won on the same ballot that Donald Trump won on in 2016. I lost on the same ballot that he lost on in 2020. I didn't bitch and complain about it. I just lost. Right? Am I less of a person? Did it injure my ego? Clearly no. I have a big enough ego. You guys can all see that right now. You can all tell. Folks, do you care about this country and this democracy? Do you care about the impact that these folks are having on our kids, on our environment, on our reproductive rights, and on our ability to love who we want to love? Do you care about these things? Then run for office. Get off your dead asses. Let's go, folks. There should not be a single office without a Democrat running. There should not be a single office. Think about it. I'm a voter. I'm not that engaged, but I lean to the left. I'm a Democrat. Why? Mom and Dad were Democrats. Dad was in a union. You know, I've got a workaday job and a family. And I look at my ballot, and all I see are Republicans for this office and this office and this office. How do I feel? What is my Democratic Party doing to me? I don't want to vote for these guys. But look, guess what? I'm a good citizen. I feel like I need to vote. So what do? I vote for the Republican, I guess. Because I guess the party wasn't interested enough to field candidates in every race. Or maybe like in Arizona, which I think is foolhardy, the party wants to do this one-shot deal where we can guarantee one if we just tell everybody only vote for one, but there's two. I don't know if you guys have their legislative districts like that here. You do? I think it's crazy. Run for everything. Why not? What's the worst that can happen? You lose, and then for the rest of your life, you got a bunch of extra bumper stickers in your garage that you don't want to throw out. And for God's sakes, it matters. And all of these things that we hear each other complaining about, all of these capacities that we just toss out the window, the potential that we toss out the window. It reminds me of this. When I was running in 2016, I was at a Rotary meeting. It was either Rotary or Kiwanis. And it was a 92-year-old World War II veteran. I hope he's still alive. His name is Marshall. Marshall tells me as he gets up and he says bye, and he leaves a little bit earlier than everybody else is leaving. And he's got a little walker and he leaves on his own. And then I go out after we're all done saying goodbye to everybody, and I walk out, and he had just made it to his car. Well, Marshall was 92, give him a break, okay? And he's opening up the trunk, and he's just hauling this walker into the trunk of his just gigantic trunk of this car. You could fit 8 dead bodies in there. He may have, I don't know, but he didn't that day. And I said, "How you doing, sir?" And he says, "I want to introduce myself." That's when he introduced. He says, "My name's Marshall." And I said, "Oh, cool." I said, "I hope you enjoyed it." He says, "You remind me of something." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You know, when I was in the Navy in World War II, I was on a ship that was in the Pacific. And after the war," he said, "we went to Europe." He said, "And while I was in my basic training and throughout the whole war, we had this 10 little 2-letter words that we would say. And it was like this weird thing. I thought it was really weird, but listening to you talk reminded me of those 10 little 2-letter words." And I'm like, "Really? Okay." He says, "Then we got to Europe. We went through the Panama Canal. We got to Europe, and we loaded up with a bunch of GIs." He says, "They were all over the place. The whole ship was full of people coming home from the war. Because, you know, we have like 1 million people in theater over there, right? So he says, on the way back across the Atlantic, we hit a storm. Ripped a gigantic hole in the side of the ship. We lost 5 souls before we got back to the States." He said, "But those 10 little 2-letter words kept everybody going. And everybody knew what they were." And he says, "You remind me of those 10 little 2-letter words. And I appreciate you for that." And just like you right now, I'm sitting here thinking, what the hell is he talking about? He says, "Those 10 little 2-letter words are this: if it is to be, it is up to me." And the fact that he told me that made me feel so really like weird, like proud, right? But kind of humble and grateful, because he put into words something that I had felt. If it is to me, if it is to be, it is up to me. Say it to yourselves real quick. If it is to be, it is up to me. Let that be your mantra. And let that be the reason why you end up running for office one of these days. Or convincing the person next to you to actually run for office. In a space, yeah, you right there. She just tapped your shoulder. You're running. Pick an office and run for it. Grab some petitions and some clipboards and go stand outside of the grocery store on Saturday morning and run for office. Because if it is to be, it is up to me. Got the greatest generation through World War II. And it was just one of those throwaway things, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't around back then. And none of you look old enough to have been there either, so I'm not even going to ask. But it comes back to, you are, sweetheart, you don't look a day over 27. A little more than that? Okay. All right, I'll give it to you. Here's what this all comes back to. And you'll notice today I didn't talk a lot about issues. Because you know what the issues are. You know why you would run. You know what's happening with your local school districts. You know what's happening in your cities and towns. You know what's happening in your counties. You understand the state of Washington more than I would ever assume to. So it would be a little silly for me from Arizona to come up here and tell Washingtonians how to run their spaces. That's dumb. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not dumb. The question then becomes, how, Adrian? You're a Democrat. You ran in deep red Maricopa County, and you won. And you're a Democrat, and you ran in pretty red Arizona, the heart of Trumpism, and you won. And when you won Arizona, you only got like 3,000 votes less than Mark Kelly, and he spent about $67 million more than you did. How did you do it? Well, I think out here, y'all have a couple of Republicans here and there, right? And Democrats always want to figure out how to work with Republicans and win elections. Well, let me tell you something. If you want them to listen to you, Speak their language. It's not that hard. Talk about freedom. Talk about patriotism. Talk about liberty. Talk about the fact that you have a CCW, because some of you do, and you're not giving it up. And that's okay to be a Democrat and own a firearm. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to talk about family values. Well, what's the one thing they care about supposedly more than anything else? Family values. Well, how is it a family value if back when America was great, a science teacher could afford to have a car and a house and a 2-week vacation with his wife and 2 kids on a teacher's paycheck, and today teachers have to get a 2nd and 3rd job just to survive and pay rent? Were family values about paying teachers? That's a family value, isn't it? And keeping kids safe in school is a family value too. I don't want to get too much into that because it's sometimes rough to talk about. If you want them to listen, speak their language. Because their language is not any different than our language. Because guess what? We have families too. And we love our families just as much as they do. We just got to figure out ways to connect with the human beings and Americans who are Republicans. Why? Guess what? In Arizona, only 29% of registered voters are Democrats. And you're looking at a statewide official who won the state with a 120,000 vote margin. Why? Because I talked to them in a language they could understand. I went to chambers of commerce that tend to lean to the right. And what did I tell them? Yes, I'm a Democrat. And yes, over here I've got my warm and fuzzy projects. How am I going to get there? I'm going to tax a very healthy business community. And when you've got prosperity and you've got a lot of folks working for you and you're making a bunch of money, you're going to be paying enough taxes for me to have my warm and fuzzy project. We can do this together. We can work together to have a healthy business community and still do the things that we Democrats want to do insofar as social programs are concerned. They are not mutually exclusive. And so if we want them to listen to us, not only do we have to speak their language, but we've got to understand that among ourselves, we cannot eat our own young, folks. We cannot pretend that putting on those kid gloves and being nice is a better way to do it. Because that's what we've been doing for a long, long time. Remember what I said at the outset. You cannot govern if you do not win. And American politics has and always will be a blood sport. And blood means you're going to get cut and you're going to get bruised. Suck it up and run for office. And throw some punches. Being kind is great when you're working with kindergartners. Being genteel and polite is wonderful when you're at church or when you're with grandma. Fine. But do not forget the popularity of the NFL and the UFC in the United States of America. Do not forget that we like eating our red meat. And those wheat farmers out there, they're their own unique brand. There's 1 or 2 of them here standing outside of me. Don't pretend like they've got to become Democrats. And out here on this side of the state, forgive me to the Emerald City, I guess, but they're not going to hear it from Seattle-type Democrats. You know your people. You can win out here. You got to, first of all, run. I'm looking at you, pal. And second, you have to support one another, and you have to support your county party. You've got to be in this together. You've got to invest. If it is to be, it is up to me. Say it with me. If it is to be, it is up to me. Do it one more time. If it is to be, it is up to me. We're going to do some Q&A. You all are going to be very successful out here, Spokane Democrats. It's been a deep, deep honor to come and talk to you. We're going to do some Q&A so we can get deeper into some of these subjects. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mil gracias. I really appreciate you having me out here tonight. Thank you so much.